Okay, I'm here today with Marissa Ginagrosso, and I observed her teaching a lesson, and the lesson objectives was I can read a story fluently, I can build schema for MemFox, and wanted to start off your class rituals and rules. The students came when you asked them to come to the carpet. They came to their assigned spot so quietly. They did such a great job. I can tell you've spent a lot of time getting them ready.
Yes.
So you did a good job with that. So I want to start off by saying, what do you think was some of the successes of the lesson?
In our previous lesson, our previous unit, we had talked a lot about feelings, and I remember us really trying hard to get away from the words sad, happy, and mad, and trying to use a better word choice. And so I think that was one area that I noticed this time, that I had to remind them to pull away from those words, but once they pulled away from them, I was really impressed with the word choice that they began using to describe their feelings.
Yeah, I noticed they used the word excited. Another student had said joyful. And then as you continued through the lesson, you were asking them questions. I think another kid came up with the word love. It makes me feel loved.
Warm. I remember warm.
So, good job. That was good. So I'm looking at the introduction. You said you wanted to remind students of the story elements. So how do you think the introduction went?
I think they're able really quickly now to identify those story elements. In the beginning, the first two the mentor text that I chose, we did not discuss the feelings because I wanted to just review the characters, the setting, and the main idea. And then this lesson was the first time we had brought back in the feelings, but I thought that it was a great idea to go, since we had just recently read the previous two stories, to go back and identify those feelings without having to go through the whole process of identifying story elements, so that I could get them to focus a little bit more on what I wanted them to focus on for the day.
Right. So, and I noticed that you did that too. So you added the new column. We're adding a new column is what you said, and it's going to be the feelings column. And then you went back and then you asked your students, when they were reading that book, how were you feeling? So that was good to do that. As far as your lesson of the introduction of the lesson, would there be anything that you might want to change or do something different to improve student achievement?
Since it was the first time we had discussed the feelings, I felt like I was trying to scaffold a lot. I probably, what I could have done is taken a quick gauge on where students were feeling, like a quick formative somehow, whether it was with a post-it note of some kind or maybe an index card, just to kind of see where they were. Or it could have just been as simple as a turn and talk, so that I wasn't necessarily just giving them the answer right away. I felt like I scaffolded a little bit too much, and I struggle with that coming down from 4th grade. I don't know how much to scaffold for them yet. So I think a quick turn and talk could have helped, letting them do a discussion first and then kind of calling on a few friends. Yeah,
that's a good idea, because then the momentum would have then continued and would have gone a little bit faster. Let's see. I noticed that you reviewed the story elements of 3 books. So do you think reviewing 3 books improved their achievement of that concept of building schema?
Absolutely. I think after the goal was to try and immerse them as much as we can in MemFox books, and they had actually read more than 3 books. Those were just the 3 that we had read as a whole class together. But I think taking the time to go back to ones that we've already read really helped them to make the connections they needed to make.
Right. Good. I thought that was good too. That was good. The next thing, when we go to, you were activating their prior knowledge, and I documented that you say, well, we listen to our inner voice to keep track of our thinking. So my question was, did your student have previous experience or practice with keeping track of their inner thinking?
Definitely. Okay. The unit before, we were doing informational book clubs, and the whole purpose of the informational book clubs was to keep track of their inner voice. And so I had modeled for them. They could use post-it notes, just a bookmark, or what else did we use? I think it was an index card. And so then they could keep track of their own thinking that way, which again was a great connection to be able to jump right in with this unit with that.
Yeah, good. That was good. So that was great. Activating their prior knowledge on that. So that goes to my next question, which I think you just answered it. So, what tools do the students use to keep track of their inner thinking? And so you said sticky notes, bookmarks, index cards. So, yeah, they're all good tools for them to use.
Some even started, it was funny because we were making that anchor chart together. And so sometimes I just leave blank paper out for them to choose as well, to just kind of see what creative thinkers they can be. And some just drew the whole chart. Like they wanted to draw the chart with the columns. And I had never given them the idea of doing that, but like especially my higher readers, that was one thing they connected with really well, and so they drew that chart and filled all of the spots in with their own Mem Fox book, which was really great.
That is. Isn't that exciting?
Yes.
When you see them
Definitely.
take on the role of the
Goosebumps.
teacher? I know. It's cool. They want to be like you.
They do.
Yeah. Okay, and my next question, I think I'm moving on to the modeling part. So I noticed on the modeling that you called on 8 students during the modeling time. So to increase student achievement, can you think of another way students could share their responses?
Definitely. I feel like one place I always go back to is just that turn and talk. So then every kid feels like they have a chance to share and that their voice matters, because we talk about how it's polite for one person to share and then the other person has to share and how you respond to each other. And sometimes I forget that that's a great way to allow for all kids to feel empowered.
Yeah.
Another way could have been to, when we did our share session at the end, to allow them to, I always feel like I go back to my higher readers when I choose kids to share, but really everybody needs to have a fair chance to share as well, regardless of what they're going to share, but then so that they feel that they have confidence that they are doing what the teachers asked me to do.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it always has to be in your mini lesson, but it could go back to your reflection session as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. So, yeah, okay. Let's see. And I noticed, too, that during the modeling you reviewed all the story elements after the read aloud. So do you review all the story elements every time you do a read aloud? Or is it just for certain objectives?
Just certain objectives. I think it depends on what unit we're in. This unit really focused on the story elements, and so for myself, I want, even if they were getting characters, they were getting setting. I noticed even just a couple kiddos that still aren't getting it, it's good for them to hear it continuously throughout. But not every time I do a read aloud do I do the story elements.
I was just curious about that. And then during the coaching part of the lesson, which is the we do part of the lesson, why did you decide to do a partner share for the main idea?
Again, I think it goes back to that empowerment and that confidence. And this was the first lesson that we had done with feelings. And at least for this unit, we had done it in a previous unit. But I think it really helped the kids to confirm what they were feeling. And, there's quite a few handful of kids that don't want to speak up and speak out because they're just that quiet inner self.
You have some very shy, quiet kiddos.
And they always have very great things to say, but they're just not as, I don't want to say the word, it's not that they're not confident, it's just that they're just an inner, they keep things in for themselves. And so, going back to your question, I feel like when they work in partnerships, and I try to pair their partnerships so that it's not always a high kiddo with a high kiddo, but so that they have an opportunity to teach each other. And so I think their partnerships help to improve student achievement by allowing them to work together. And again, they feel more confident talking one-on-one rather than in front of 19 kiddos.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah, that's very good. So it does improve their achievement, because if you're grouping them like heterogeneous groups, with the high and kind of a medium high, then they kind of support each other.
Definitely.
So that's good. Or a medium kiddo with like maybe a low medium kiddo. It gives the low medium kiddo a little bit more success.
Definitely.
Yeah. Good thinking. Here's another thing. I think I'm getting into the well, this is still part of the we do part, kind of moving towards the scaffolding part. So your modeling was over, and I noticed that you passed out Mem Fox books to specific students. And so what was your thinking behind that? Why did you decide to pass out Mem Fox books to students instead of letting them choose?
I really made sure that I knew my stack, because I wanted to make sure that I could pair the students with the right book, a just right book for them. And I knew some of them, the content was a little bit harder, the vocabulary was a little harder, and so I tried to give them a book that they could be successful with, finding the story elements and not struggling so much with the words, but actually focusing more on the story elements. And so I wanted them to be able to fluently read one of Mem Fox's books, and it was important for me to just choose that for them rather than them picking their own Mem Fox books. However, do they have an opportunity to read them all? Absolutely, but for this specific piece, I wanted to pick it for them.
That was really good. I thought, yay, very good. Good job. Yeah, you did a nice job with that. I love that. Let's see, what did you notice about student success during the partner share, which I think is going back to the scaffolding part?
Is this where they're off independently? Or are we still on the carpet?
I think I've got my questions out of order, so I'm thinking about when they were still on the carpet and you were scaffolding them. What did you notice about their successes when they were partner sharing? And I think you kind of talked about that a little bit.
I think it goes back to, I was just so impressed with the word choice that they were choosing for their feelings, and the warm and the loved, and I mean, those were not words that were on the top of our feelings word bank, and so for them to go beyond that just impressed me a lot.
Yeah, they were good. Let's see. Why do you give students a choice for using different paper for writing their reading responses? Like, you gave them a choice that was a sticky note, lined paper. Did you say reader's journal, I think?
I think they had plain paper was a choice.
Okay.
I think it's so important to give kids choice, because I feel like there's a big motivation piece in when you let them decide. I think it's always important to model all the choices first, and then letting them kind of explore, which we had done in previous lessons. But I think it's important for them to, at the end of the day, they need to choose what works best for them as a reader, because what you choose may not work for me. And now, as a 6 and 7 year old, it's going to be hard for them to figure out which one's going to work, but as long as they're trying it out and exploring, I think it gives them ownership in what they're doing, and again, it just improves that engagement for themselves.
True. Yeah, good. So do you ever limit their choice of paper?
Absolutely.
Do you ever say, today we're just going to use lined paper, or today we're just going to use plain paper, today we're just going to do sticky notes?
Definitely. And I think it kind of goes to the previous lessons where we may have just focused on, okay, today we're just using sticky notes because I want you to feel what it's like to use sticky notes. And then some kids are going to know. Sorry.
That's okay.
That's when we're supposed to go to lunch.
I know. It's time. We're late.
But I think when I limit their choice, it gives them a chance to experience all the ways I want them to record their thinking. And then it leads up to their own independency on which one they choose is best for them. Because I know as myself as a reader, I would much rather write on lined paper than blank paper, because it's just an organization thing for myself. Or post-it notes, I feel like, give me a good way to lay things out, but then I always want to go back to a lined paper because I want to, organization is big for me, but some kids, they can freely organize with just a blank piece of paper.
True. And they're more creative.
And I have to let it go as a teacher. It's hard.
Yeah. I understand. That's good. That's good on your part, is to give them that choice and that freedom to choose, and then it helps them grow as an individual.
Definitely.
And so Very good. So do you ever use a graphic organizer for Reader's Workshop?
Definitely. After this lesson, after we got our feelings down, we went over all 4 story elements. That was the focus for this unit. One of the next I can statements was they could compare similarities and differences in MemFox stories. And so then we pulled out the Venn diagram and started using that to help us organize our thinking on what story elements were.
See, and I missed that. So was that the next day then?
That was the next day, or maybe 2 days later. I don't remember exactly how many days,
perfect.
but it was later in the unit that we had.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I was wondering about that.
And it was really interesting because they're like, what's a graphic organizer? What's a Venn diagram? And so we had to talk about how sometimes readers use specific things to organize their thinking, and this was one way they could organize their thinking. And so it was kind of fun to build their knowledge and vocabulary with what a Venn diagram is. Because sometimes I just assume.
Yeah, I wondered what the next few days held for them and what you were going to do in your class. Because I'm like, oh, I wonder what they're doing next. I want to come back.
Yeah, you should have.
Yeah. So, good. So I also noticed that students read independently for 13 minutes. And I think you and I were talking about that. Your directions were that they would partner read for that part because you felt like they were still in the we do part of building schema for feelings. So do you think that the students were able to complete the objective in that time frame?
This is a piece, the independency, that I probably could go back and change for next year. Because sometimes it takes them 13 minutes to get through the book and they may not get through the task.
Right.
And so if I would go back and change this, I probably would have maybe done the we do the following day and myself read a mentor text or shown a video of a mentor text of MemFox and then let them go off in partnerships, because really the focus was more of the story elements, not if they could fluently read the book. That was another part of the unit. And so that's one thing I have to remember with 6 and 7-year-olds is they may not get through the whole book to get to the task.
Right.
And so I noticed a few groups got through the whole objective, but not all of them, and it was just because they didn't get through the book, which it wasn't they weren't focused or engaged. They were.
Absolutely. They were.
They just didn't get through.
They were engaged,
the book. And so I forget that sometimes I need to be the reader for them, because at the end of the day, the purpose was the story elements, not about
to build
finishing
their schema.
the book.
Right, to build their schema. Right,
definitely.
Exactly. Let's see. So what was the indication to you that students mastered the objective?
During our reflection session, or even during one-on-one conferring, I was looking specifically if they could name the story elements, but specifically for this lesson was to look at their feelings and were they able to make a connection with the story. But then that kind of goes back to my part. Did I give them a book they were able to make feelings or connections with feelings in the story, or was it just, did it not have much substance in the story? But I think the one-on-one conferring really helped, and then again at the reflection time.
Right, sure. Okay. The formative assessment lists 6 things as evidence of understanding. So I'm just going to read off of it. It said that there was a sticky note parking lot, writing a book question, new idea that was learned from the book, inference with text clues, turn and talk, and class share time. So did you, which did you use to assess student achievement out of those 6 things? Or which would you like to try to use? I don't know if you...
I have a parking lot, and I forget to use it, to be honest. So that would be a nice way, to do a quick formative assessment is give them a sticky note, tell them to go back and write what feeling they had for the day, and then they could go and record it. I mean, that's a quick one to do, and I feel like we get thrown at us so many different ways to formatively assess students.
I know.
And to me, that's a simple way that you just check in with them really fast. So I could have gone back and done that. Looking at your other ones.
So it was, I got it from the assessment page. I think it's right here. I got to find it. Oh, here it is.
Oh, yes. I think the goal for this lesson was I kind of got it more from turning and talking and the class share time.
Right.
Other points of the unit, I felt like I was going back to some of these other pieces, which I feel like you get a lot of formative assessments from your one-on-one conferring. And so it may not be
you do
completely in your share time.
Right. And I did notice that you did a lot of turn and talks and class share time too. So I like the way this is set up, where it has the student number, and then you write that yes, they mastered the objective, or not quite there yet, or no, not at all.
Definitely.
So I liked how you were using that.
Thank you.
But so that sounds like maybe the parking lot might be something you could focus on the next time you would teach this lesson.
Definitely.
Something you might want to try.
Definitely.
Have you used the parking lot concept very much this year, or in other previous lessons?
In previous lessons I have, but again, not as much as I would like, and I think it's just, I always go back to something that's more for myself and more concrete, and sometimes I just forget that I have it, but I should use it more often, because then I quickly see, because you can't get to everybody in one session, where a parking lot you could see right away. Oh, they didn't write anything. You could just quickly count your sticky notes. Oh, I have 15 kids that put sticky notes up. Let me see the 3 that didn't write. Definitely.
And then you would know, well, maybe they just didn't have enough time. Maybe they didn't have a connection to that book. Maybe I have to have a partner read that book to them. Or so you definitely. You would know. So that kind of went and merged into my next question was, have you ever used the sticky note parking lot for accountability of student work?
Yes. The last unit, our informational book clubs, I used it for them choosing their books, or the topics they were interested in for their book clubs. And so then I was able to quickly see what student had not chosen their books and which student had chosen their topics.
Yeah.
And so then I've used it in the past too, almost as, again, for accountability, but when I taught 4th grade, I gave them the Post-it note, and then when they were in their book nooks or reading their books or whatever, I gave them a Post-it note, and whenever they finished the task, they went and put it on the parking lot. So it wasn't like they all did it at the very end. So then I could almost see, okay, do I need to give them 5 more minutes of independent reading time because I have 10 kids up, I need 9 more to write, or do I need to give them, or is there not many up there, so maybe that tells me I need to give more direction on their Post-it notes, because we've been reading independently for 15-20 minutes and nobody's turned one in yet.
That's very thoughtful.
But
I like that idea. Can I use that?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. I love that.
Definitely.
That's a great idea.
Just so it's not, because sometimes I think a parking lot we tend to use at the end.
Right. You don't
but
have
it could
to.
be ongoing.
Didn't think about that. I love it.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's a
Definitely.
great idea. I'm going to share that. I'm going to use it, steal it, and share it.
Try it.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me know how it goes.
Super. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Definitely.
Is there any other way you could assess student achievement, do you think, besides this assessment? And we talked about this sticky note parking lot. Is there anything else come to your mind, or anything you might want to try?
Not necessarily formatively, but our summative had one of the questions was what feelings does one of Fox's books give you? And so I think even if I wasn't able to catch a student more than one time in a conference, I was able to see on their summative if they were able to understand the concept of building schema with Fox stories.
Okay.
Formatively.
So on the summative, I kind of want to go back. So you said they got to choose the book and then write down the feeling that
I'll show you.
the book gave them?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to see that. See, it's hard because I didn't get to go through the whole process with you from beginning to end.
So let me find one that...
Oh, wow.
So they, at the very end of the unit, after we'd gone 2 weeks, they got to pick their favorite Fox story. They had to tell one reason why they enjoyed the story and tell us why. And then tell why a friend should read this story. And I directed this question more towards their feelings. Like, what feeling did this book give you that makes you want to go tell somebody else because you're just really excited about it? And what part of the story gave you that feeling? Because that's what's going to allow for other kiddos to want to read this story as well, or other teachers. Yes, definitely. Let's see it. Here's another one.
They did a fabulous job.
Thanks.
Very good.
We kind of talked about, you know, like their feeling is like what you're really feeling in your heart. And so I love how she wrote, you should read this book to feel funny. So like if you're really just in a silly mood, then go find this book because it's going to help with your silly mood.
Oh, I love it. They did a fabulous job.
Thanks. Their favorite story was A Particular Cow. If you've never read that story,
I have
you need
not.
to read it.
Okay.
Or this
I'm
one,
add that to my list.
You should read this book to feel sad to happy, because this one we started out feeling sad in the story and then we moved. Our feelings started to move from sad to happy. So if you're in a downer mood, you could read this story to make you feel happy.
And look how they wrote that.
How she moved it.
I know. It's so clever. Yeah.
So anyways, I think their summatives helped me to see as well. Were they able to convince somebody else to try to read their story as well, based upon the feelings they had?
You both did a fabulous job.
Thanks.
You and your students.
Thanks.
So, is there anything else you would like to share?
I think I've learned through this unit that it's so important, that first lesson when you start a new unit, to hook your kiddos. And the way I did it this time, which when we have another author study, I would love to do it again, but Mim Fox has an amazing website. And that was the first thing we did. We just went on there and we just explored her website. She was reading books to the kids. There were questions that the kids could ask, and they could reply or answer questions or ask questions of Mim Fox, and she would reply back. And I think it just helps solidify that Mim Fox is not just an author; she's a person too.
She's real,
and she's real.
Right.
And
it's a big hook for them, wasn't it?
My kids were so sad to have the Mim Fox unit be over because they wanted to keep reading them, and I took 36 library books back of Mim Fox, and they were so sad to see me box them up on Friday. But I told them, but they're in the library. You get to go check them out now. Like, it's your turn to go and get them. And so I'll be curious to see after spring break if any of them went and got any, because they loved her stories, and I loved them too. And
that's how you know you were successful in that unit. Absolutely. When the kids go, no, we don't want to stop.
Right, definitely.
Awesome. You did an awesome job.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear you talk about it.
Good.
Very excited. Let's see, what else? Would you like me to share some suggestions or anything?
Absolutely.
Okay. I don't have my right notes, so I'm going to have to switch. I think what I really wanted to suggest, I won't dig through my pile.
You're good.
Is I liked how you did a lot of turn and talk and partner share, but one thing that I was kind of thinking would show accountability for students when they were reading was to do the parking lot. It's kind of what I was thinking would be beneficial for them. Then you could, like you said previously, you kind of can gauge, are they getting this concept, are they not? So you kind of know that's a strategy you used in the past, and it works, and you kind of can't use everything all the time. You kind of have to pick and choose what's going to be best for the unit that you're in or for your students. But I think that's one thing I think maybe would have increased student achievement.
Definitely.
And to make sure that all students were engaged, or you would know, you could go back and check in with some students that were maybe struggling getting through that concept or just getting through the book. And as far as student achievement, I've seen your assessments. I'm thinking I'm very impressed. But I noticed you talked about this graphic organizer too. Is that something that you were wanting to try to use for this unit, or was it for a different unit?
This one we used, I pulled it out once I felt that they were confident in knowing how an author can make us feel in our heart. Where a part of me feels like I should have just introduced it right away. just
Right.
me start modeling with it so that they can see that authors can create feelings in our heart. And so that I can't, because when they did this, I mean, you've seen this, you've done this as well, but I added the lines at the end because I wanted them to tell me why they felt that way, using evidence from the text. And so the kiddos had to write something along the lines, this made me feel joyful, or Mem Fox's story made me feel joyful at the end because Koalalu's mother shared that he loved her.
Right, right.
Kind of going back to the evidence piece of where, yes, it made you feel this way, but why? Like, I want to know what inside the story made you feel that way. And so, I think next year I will pull this out right away because they're at the stage in first grade where they're ready for writing down their thinking and recording their thinking, and their handwriting is getting more legible so that we can read what they're wanting to share with us. And so I just think this would have been a little bit more concrete for them to see, this is what I felt in the beginning, this is what I felt in the middle, and now this is what I'm feeling at the end, and here's why I'm feeling this way.
Okay. So you were thinking about, to improve student achievement, to maybe introduce this by the second book, or what are you thinking? First book, second book, third book?
Probably,
I mean, would be beneficial.
Probably the second or third book. I think the first lesson was really just to kind of review the story elements we've talked about since the beginning of first grade, but then I think they would have definitely been ready for the second and third book to jump right in. And we did this, but I wish I would have done it a little bit longer than what I did.
Right. Okay. So, and we'll talk more about this plan to increase student achievement, and then I'll get back with you.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Marissa.
You're welcome.
Ooh.